Well, the wait is over. Apple now finally has its own professional video camera app, or as they like to call it, the Final Cut camera app. I'm not sure I get the name, but hey, whatever. I'm just glad to see that they have now released a more professional app. But that really is the question. How professional is it? The interface is very simple, just like the native camera app. The buttons are fairly intuitive. You've got a readout on the left here showing your frame rate, your resolution, your codec, and your color space. And you can click on that, and I do like this aspect, and you can switch what you're shooting. Like right now I'm shooting Apple ProRes, or I could switch to H.265 HEVC. And then SDR, same thing. I'm recording in standard Rec 709, but I could go to HDR, or importantly, I could go to Apple Log. And that's what I shoot more times than not when I'm doing something more on the professional side. If I'm doing anything for family or vacation or whatever, no, the files are way too big. If you know anything about Apple Log, if you watch my other videos, Apple Log turns off all the dynamic tone mapping, turns sharpening off or at least way down, and you get much more pleasing cinematic images. And then you can set your resolution. And again, I like how this is all right on the main screen. And then you can also set your frames per second. And they've got 24, 25 for PAL, which is a big one for my European and rest of the world friends, 30 and 60. 60 frames per second, more times than not, would be slow motion. And you got a little X there to close out of that. Again, I like that it's right there on the main screen. Same with the lens picker, and this is just like the native camera app. Although one thing you'll see that it's missing if you look closely, that is, it doesn't have the 48mm virtual camera, which I don't really understand. And that's a big negative, I have to say, because I use that all the time for video and photo in the native camera app. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And then when you're on a particular lens, you can actually zoom in or zoom out. Now, the one thing I don't know is whether that degrades it, whether that's a digital zoom. Apple works its magic and it uses multiple lenses, at least on the native camera app, to zoom in. And so sometimes it does degrade it, sometimes it doesn't. As a general rule, I would not zoom though. The other thing is you can click on that and you have the actual lenses that you can choose, like a lens picker, once you're in the zoom category. And the big thing in this app is to manually set different settings. And you've got them right here on the right. Now, these are somewhat intuitive, but a little bit weird when you first use them. Typically, I don't set manual focus using my phone. What I often do is use auto and then lock it. And that's what I would do here. And so I let it auto expose, and then I click that, and now it's on manual focus. And the way you know that your settings are locked is the icon turns yellow. This top one is super simple. It's just the orientation lock. You can leave it unlocked, or I like to leave it on left because that way if you're moving the camera around, it doesn't actually go into vertical shooting mode. And so that's nice to have built into the app. Focus, I just went over. And then this is a big one. You've got manual control over your shutter and your ISO, which is how you control exposure on a phone because the aperture is fixed. And so it is nice to have these controls. It's a little bit basic, but it is nice to be able to adjust it as needed. Same with the shutter. I'm shooting 24 frames per second, and so more times than not, you want to double that and be 148 shutter. So it's nice to see that. And then when you're judging exposure, right now I'm just doing it by eye. They don't have a histogram or any kind of waveform. That's much more professional. They do have zebras, which I have turned on, and zebras will, I'll get ahead of myself here a little bit, overexposure indicator. Let me see if I can overexpose this image. There you go. So now you can see that the red zebras are showing that image is overexposed. And so that is nice to have, especially if you're adjusting stuff manually. But when I'm using this kind of app, that's kind of an overall point I want to mention. Kind of like I said with focus, what I typically will do is I do auto exposure, but then I lock it. And so that's exposed properly, at least what the camera thinks. Although one note, often with an iPhone, you do need to underexpose just a little bit. And so right now I'm dropping down the overall exposure, got it on -4 there. It does tend to overexpose a little bit, but then I hit manual and now that setting is locked. And so it's locked on 148 shutter and ISO of 125. And again, when I go back out to the main menu here, you can see that that's locked. And then another big feature that I really do like is the white balance. And so now you can dial in the white balance you want, or better yet, what I tend to do is use a preset. You can do daylight, shadow, cloudy, tungsten, and so you pick whatever setting you're in, or you can do auto and then lock it, kind of like I showed earlier with the focus, etc. And you can do fixed. Fixed is just whatever you set it at. If you want to manually dial it in, you can see I'm moving the numbers there. I'm at 6,700 Kelvin all the way down to 3,000 or lower, and that gets real blue because I'm shooting inside. But what I would do more times than not is just do a preset and leave it on that. If you're outside, choose daylight. If you're inside using tungsten lights, choose tungsten. But more times than not, even on traditional cameras, I'm almost always shooting with daylight because all my lights are daylight balanced, and then the sun, of course, is daylight. And often if you're lighting a scene in a room, you'll bring in sunlight or you'll simulate sunlight, and that's daylight balanced as well. But that is great. Until recently, you couldn't even lock the white balance, but now at least on the native camera app, you can lock it while you're recording. You can't set it. And so now with the Final Cut camera app, you can actually set these various features, and that is big. That's a nice thing. Now the last thing I'll show really is the menu setup, and it's very basic. You've got preferences, and basically this is be what your default is. And this is subjective, but I got it set up to ProRes. 4K log is my default that I want. Stabilization, yeah, I want that on. And then mirror front camera. And then you've got your tools. I showed the exposure indicator. It also has focus peaking, which is nice. That way the little green lines show that you're in focus. So let's say I went back to manual. Now when I'm out of focus, you don't get those green lines. One note though, because iPhones are using contrast-based peaking, it's not 100% accurate. It's better than nothing, but it's not perfect by any stretch. And in this situation, what I would probably do is I'd go back to auto and then I would lock it. That way you know you're in focus. You've got a grid overlay, which is for shooting with the rule of thirds. If you're a beginner, this is a good idea. I know some professionals like it. I do not. It gets in my way, so I turn that off. And then interestingly, they do have aspect ratio guide, but it's very minimal. It's square or 4:3. And so this is obviously, you can faintly see it there, designed if you're framing something for social media, Instagram, Facebook, what have you. And so to me, I don't know, I probably would rarely use that, if ever, because y'all just shoot 16:9 and then reframe and post. But if you do a lot of 4:3 stuff, then I guess that's a nice feature to have. I wish they had other aspect ratios, but really that's kind of the overall point with this app. It's professional in quotes, but it's not really professional. The last thing in the settings menu is audio, and this is super basic. I have a mic plugged in, so you can choose this device, which would be recording to the phone, or you can record to the external mic, which I have. And maybe I'm missing it, I don't know, but the one thing you can't do, which is baffling, I click on the audio meters. To my knowledge, at least with this version of the app, you can't set the audio levels. So that really defeats the purpose for really anything, again, professional. Now, I don't use Final Cut Pro, but if you do use Final Cut Pro, one really cool thing about this, and I think this is really what it's geared more towards, is you click on that and you can go into a multicam mode. You can do live multicam with up to 4 cameras at once. Again, I don't use Final Cut Pro and I rarely ever do multicam, but that is pretty cool that you can do that with this app. Now, there's other apps that have been around for a long time that'll do that, but it is kind of nice that that's built in directly with Apple. The last thing I want to show, this is probably the main reason I would use this app over the native camera app, is you've got this library here. You've got a media library, and what you can do is when you record a clip, I'll record just a quick few seconds of this. Now, when you record that clip, it goes into the library here. It does not, and I repeat, does not go into your main Photos app. What is the benefit of that? Well, if you're an iPhone user, you more than likely use iCloud. And so these gigantic ProRes files clog up your iCloud backup. Not only does it take up a lot of the space, and if you have, depending on the size of account you have to pay for the space. But now with this, the media goes into the app, just like with other apps like Blackmagic, Filmic Pro, etc., and doesn't clog that up. Now, if you want to put it there, you can click that and you can do save the video, and that will go into your cloud. into your backup. You can see this video file right there is about 3 seconds. It's 340 megabytes. And so it adds up quick. And so it's nice to have it in here. Then you can do playback. You can delete the file. And then right here, you've got a button where you can actually transfer media into Final Cut Pro or your iPad from the app. Now, again, I don't use this stuff. It's nice to have it. But for me, what I would do is just connect my phone via USB-C directly into my computer or my iPad, or record out to an external drive. So overall, I'm a bit underwhelmed by the new app. However, again, to be positive, I will say that I think that it's a step in the right direction. Now, who is it for? It's really not for me. The only time I will use it really is if I'm wanting to shoot with the native camera app and want to shoot ProRes, and I'd rather shoot in this app because of the library feature. You don't have to worry about recording into the Photos app. That is pretty cool. And then of course, having the peaking and such, that is nice. However, it really just depends on what you're doing. But if you're doing anything more professional at all, just go with the Blackmagic camera app. I don't really see this as competition for that in the least bit, not even close actually. And so it's a weird in-between app really. It kind of reminds me of the new Kino app from Halide, which I haven't covered yet on the channel, but I probably will. It's what I would call a prosumer app. It's in between a professional and a beginner. So if you're a beginner, this is probably a great app to get you started, to learn about how to use manual settings and such. But if you're a pro, it's still too watered down. And so for anyone with more experience, this app is probably not really for you. The only caveat would be if you do use Final Cut Pro and you do multicam stuff, which I don't. But if that's you, then this app could be great. Again, I am glad that Apple is embracing more professional features. I don't understand the name Final Cut Camera, but hey, whatever. So anyway, that's all I've got in this video. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and let me know if you want me to cover the Halide Kino video camera app as well. Thanks for watching. This is Blake Calhoun. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.